I was once mocked by my friends for my appearance. Now I'm a famous male model. My name is Jaxon Reed, and if you think being ridiculed for your looks ends in high school, you're wrong. Sometimes it brands you for life. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Ethan's Way. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. The fire crackled like it was laughing with them. It was just another beach bonfire's sand smoke and the hum of cheap speakers balanced on a cooler. We were 17 then. I stood slightly outside the circle trying to pretend the heat on my face came from the flames, not the humiliation crawling under my skin. "Hey, Jackson Mason," the golden boy with perfect teeth called out. "Didn't know Frankenstein came to the party." Laughter. Another voice chimed in. "Nah man, he looks more like the rejected wax statue from Madame Tussauds." More laughter, louder this time. I laughed too, the kind that doesn't reach the chest, the kind you force out because doing anything else would be a mistake. I shoved my hands deeper into the pockets of my hoodie trying to disappear. But in moments like that, you're never invisible. You're a spotlight. My face was long, not traditionally handsome. Sharp cheekbones that made me look gaunt, narrow eyes that always seemed tired. I'd never had clear skin. Puberty had been cruel, and I wore its reminders like a roadmap of every time someone pointed and whispered. I remember wondering in that moment how much pain would it take for them to stop. How silent could I get before I truly vanished? The worst part, these were my friends. Or at least they used to be. We grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools. But as they got taller, hotter, more confident, I got quieter. Their approval became oxygen, and like a fool I kept showing up, hoping one day they'd see me. Instead, I became the punchline that kept the night moving. At some point during the night, someone handed me a bottle of beer. I don't even like beer, but I took it. Anything to avoid eye contact. I sat down in the sand away from the main circle, watching the fire blur behind the tears I refused to let fall. That was the night I decided I was done trying. Done waiting for people to see something in me worth defending. After graduation, most of them went to state colleges. I didn't. My grades were decent, but the idea of walking into another building filled with strangers ready to categorize me by my appearance made me sick. I took a job stocking shelves at a 24-hour grocery store near downtown. It was perfect. Late night shifts meant fewer people, fewer mirrors, and no cameras. I didn't date, didn't post online. My life became a quiet routine, wake, work, sleep. I avoided places where people gathered to be seen, because I wasn't someone people wanted to see. But memories are sticky. Even years later, I'd hear Mason's voice in my head, Frankenstein, and flinch like I'd just been struck. I avoided social media, but once in a while I'd catch glimpses of them through mutual friends, now dressed in suits, arms around women lives, seemingly perfect. And me? I couldn't even bring myself to take a selfie. One night, I remember it vividly, a group of college kids came into the store around 2 a.m. Drunk but harmless. One of them, a girl with a camera slung around her neck, kept looking at me while I stocked the cereal aisle. I caught her whispering something to her friend. They both laughed. It was the bonfire all over again. I clenched the box in my hand so hard it bent, but I kept my head down. I thought they'd just walk away. Instead, she lifted her camera. Click. The shutter sound hit me like a slap. I turned toward her, already fuming. But she didn't smirk or mock. She just said, "You have one of the most honest faces I've ever seen. That bone structure is crazy." Then she left, just like that. I stood there confused, angry, suspicious. Was that a compliment? The next morning, I tried to forget about it. I didn't expect it to matter. I figured it was some artsy joke or part of a trend, until my coworker Julia walked in later that day holding her phone wide-eyed. "Jackson, have you seen this?" She showed me a post on Instagram, a black and white candid of me in the cereal aisle looking tired and slightly hunched. The caption read, "Found beauty in the most unexpected place last night." The photo had already gotten 20,000 likes. My name wasn't tagged, but it was me, and suddenly people were asking who the mystery man was. The photo haunted me. For days I kept checking the post. Every time I looked, the number climbed higher, 50,000, then 80,000 likes. The comments were flooding in. "He looks like a model from a noir film. Those cheekbones, unreal. Someone give this man a contract." I didn't know how to process it. Praise for my face felt like a prank. My mind immediately built defenses. Maybe it's edited. Maybe it's a joke that hasn't landed yet. I'd been conditioned to brace for humiliation. Compliments felt like daggers wrapped in flowers. Still, I saved the photo. I'd never liked any picture of myself before, but something about this one, the shadows, the stillness, the honesty made me pause. It wasn't posed, it wasn't trying, it just was, and maybe that was the point. A week later, I was restocking frozen dinners when someone approached me. She was tall, stylish in that casual but clearly expensive way, and had a clipboard tucked under her arm. Her hair was coiled into a sleek bun, and she wore red lipstick like it was war paint. "You're Jaxon, right?" she asked, her tone brisk. I nearly dropped a box of lasagna. Yeah. Can I help you?" She smiled slightly. "Name's Clara. I run a boutique modeling agency, Scout House. We represent non-traditional faces. I saw your photo on Instagram." My stomach sank. So it was a setup. "Look," I said, raising my hands. If this is some kind of prank, Clara narrowed her eyes. "Do I look like someone who wastes time on pranks? Fair point." She handed me a card. "You've got something symmetry emotion story. The camera likes you. If you're interested, we do test shoots every Saturday. No pressure, just show up." And then she walked out, like she'd just invited me to jury duty. I turned the card over in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have, like a key to a door I wasn't sure I was ready to open. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, turning the words over and over. The camera likes you. Not people like you. Not you're handsome. But the camera. What did that even mean? I dug out a cracked hand mirror from under my bathroom sink and looked at myself in the dim yellow light. The same long face, the same tired eyes, the same acne scars along my jawline. But I didn't look away this time. I studied myself like a stranger. There was something sharp, unusual, maybe not ugly, just misunderstood. The next few days were strange. Customers whispered, some even asked for selfies. "Are you the guy from that post?" I kept my head down, told them I wasn't, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Julia, my coworker, was the only one who treated me the same. She didn't fawn or gawk. One night during our overlapping shift, she said, "You know, maybe it's time people saw what I've seen all along." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "You've always had this quiet thing about you, like you're carrying a story. Some people shout to be noticed. You don't, and maybe that's why you stand out now." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Saturday came. I stared at Clara's card for an hour before finally throwing on the cleanest hoodie I had and taking the bus downtown. The studio was hidden in a building that smelled like dust and lavender. Upstairs, soft music played through tinny speakers. The floorboards creaked under my weight like they were testing me. Inside the studio was minimalist, just a chair, a backdrop, a tripod, and a man with salt and pepper hair adjusting lights. He looked up, startled. "You must be Jaxon." Clara appeared behind him, sipping coffee. "Glad you came. This is Pierre. He's got the best eye in the business." Pierre didn't say much. He just nodded and waved me over. I stood in front of the camera, stiff as a corpse. "Relax," he muttered. "We're not cutting your head off." I tried to laugh. It came out weird. He snapped a few frames, then lowered his camera. "You're thinking too much. Look at the lens like it's someone who hurt you." That made me pause. He raised the camera again. "Now, think about the worst moment you ever lived through. Bonfire, laughter, Frankenstein." I clenched my jaw. Click. Then he said, "Now imagine that same person watching you win." Something shifted in me. I don't know what changed, but I stopped posing. I just stood there, breathed, let the lens take what it wanted. After 20 minutes, Pierre stepped back and studied the screen. He turned to Clara. "He's not polished, but damn if he doesn't hold the frame." Clara nodded. "Told you." I didn't say much. I just stood there, letting the words settle into my chest like hot coals. As I left the studio, Clara handed me a folder. "These are your digitals. No pressure, but if you're open to it, I want to pitch you to a client for a small local campaign." I took the folder, fingers trembling. On the bus ride home, I peeked at the images. They didn't look like me. They looked like the version of me I had always hoped existed. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. I didn't expect anything to come of it. Clara had given me the folder with a neutral expression, like it wasn't a big deal. But for me, that manila envelope might as well have been lined with gold. When I got home, I placed it gently on the kitchen table like it was fragile. I made myself dinner. Microwaved noodles but barely touched it. The photo sat there while I paced the floor. Eventually I gave in. I spread the shots across the table one by one, and I just stared. This wasn't the same face I saw in the mirror every morning. Yes, it was me, same bone structure, same scars, same eyes. But somehow, Pierre had captured something I didn't know I had. Depth, story, presence. I looked like someone who had lived through something and survived. 2 days later, Clara called. There's a local brand doing a shoot for their winter line. Streetwear stuff, very raw, very moody. I sent your digitals. They want to meet. I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? Like a real job. It's a test gig, Jaxon. Small budget, but it's a step. Show up. Be yourself. That's the point. She gave me the time and address, then hung up. I spent the next 3 hours staring at my closet. I had 3 pairs of jeans, all a little worn, and a handful of hoodies. Nothing felt like it belonged on a model. But in the end, I just picked the least wrinkled outfit and hoped they'd see past the clothes. The shoot was in a converted warehouse. The walls were exposed brick, the air cold and metallic. The team was small. A makeup artist, a stylist, and a guy named Eli who introduced himself as the creative director. You're Jaxon, right? He asked, sizing me up like I was an exhibit. Yeah, you've got the face. Let's see if you've got the presence. They didn't want me to smile. They didn't want me to pose. They just wanted me to move, to breathe, to walk toward the camera, turn, pause, stare into the lens, over and over again. It felt stupid at first, but then I remembered what Pierre had said. Imagine the person who hurt you watching you win. So I did. I pictured the bonfire, the laughter, the comments that dug trenches under my skin. I let the pain sit in my body. I let the camera see it. When it was over, Eli leaned back and whispered to the stylist, then looked at me. Raw, unpolished, but honest. We can work with that. I left the warehouse unsure of whether I had just made a fool of myself or been discovered. But the next morning, Clara called again. They're using your shots. One of them might even be the centerpiece. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone pressed to my ear, unable to say anything. You okay? She asked. I've never been the centerpiece of anything. There was a pause. Then she said, get used to it. A week later, the campaign dropped. It wasn't huge, just an Instagram release, a few posters downtown. But there I was staring back at myself on a screen outside a sneaker store. I stood there for 15 minutes just watching people walk past it. No one pointed, no one laughed. They just looked. That was enough. And then it happened. The post went viral. Again. A fashion blogger reposted the ad with the caption, "Who is this guy?" Finally, a model who doesn't look like a clone. The comments exploded. People wanted to know who I was, where I came from, why they hadn't seen me before. That night, Clara called again. 3 agencies reached out asking about you. One from New York, one in Berlin, one in Tokyo. I thought she was kidding. She wasn't. Things moved fast after that. Faster than I could emotionally keep up with. Clara handled the negotiations, the contracts, the scheduling. I was just trying to remember to breathe. I quit the grocery store a month later. Julia hugged me on my last night. Told you, she whispered. The world was just slow to catch on. I didn't know how to say thank you, so I just held on to her a little longer than usual. The first real test came when I booked a shoot in Los Angeles. Big brand, real money, editorial spread. That morning in the dressing room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, styled, groomed, wearing clothes that cost more than my entire rent, and I froze, because I didn't recognize the man staring back. For a split second, panic rose in my chest. Was this really me, or just a carefully sculpted version of the boy they all used to laugh at? Was I becoming someone, or erasing who I used to be? The shoot began. Cameras clicked, lights flashed. People praised me, called me striking, magnetic, and natural. But I couldn't shake the voice in my head. Frankenstein. I carried that word with me like a scar visible only when the light hit just right. That night alone in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through the new photos. I zoomed in on my eyes, and I didn't see fear anymore. I saw defiance. That's when I knew this wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming someone they never believed I could be. The invitations started coming in faster than I could process them. Some were legitimate real fashion houses, rising brands, photography collectives who valued raw aesthetic over manufactured beauty. But others just wanted a piece of the viral moment. There were podcasts that asked me to talk about how I overcame bullying brands that wanted to slap me onto products that had nothing to do with style. A bottled water company offered me 10 grand to pose shirtless on a mountain. No context, just thirst. Clara handled most of it, but even she couldn't filter it all. Just remember, she warned over coffee one morning, you don't owe your story to anyone. Choose your spotlight. I nodded, but part of me felt torn. Wasn't this what I'd always wanted, to be noticed, respected, admired? Still, there was something hollow about being repackaged into a hashtag, unconventional beauty. From ugly to icon, they were catchy but reductive. I wasn't a trend, I was a person who had bled for years in silence. Then came the big one. An email from Lazarus, an avant-garde fashion label in Berlin, known for dramatic campaigns and unflinching authenticity. They didn't just want me for a shoot, they wanted me to open their next show. Clara's voice wavered when she called me. This is huge, Jaxon. You don't understand. They're basically the holy grail for your type. My type, the outcast-made icon. The boy with scars turned into statements. But it wasn't just the offer that threw me. It was who else was walking in the show. Mason. Yeah, that Mason. The same boy who called me Frankenstein at the bonfire. Apparently he'd done some fitness modeling on the side. Clean-cut, muscular, every brand safe bet. He wasn't a star, but he had enough of a portfolio to land a walk. A side piece to the spectacle, and I was the opening. Clara looked at me across the table. You okay? I just nodded. Fine, it's poetic, right? But it didn't feel poetic. It felt dangerous. Suddenly, I wasn't thinking about the show or the clothes or the photographers. I was thinking about what it would feel like to stand in front of the boy who broke me this time, with every eye in the room on me. Would I freeze? Would I flinch? Would I want to scream? The plane ride to Berlin was a blur. My stylist tried to talk to me about color palettes, but I could barely hear her. All I could think about was the weight of that old pain dragging behind me like luggage. The night before the show, we had a rehearsal. The venue was an old cathedral gutted and redesigned into a stage of steel and light. I stood under the rafters, the runway stretching out before me like a battlefield. And then I saw him, Mason, taller than I remembered, more sculpted, still arrogant. I could see it in the way he smirked at the assistants tossing his jacket on a stool like he owned the place. He didn't recognize me. I wasn't surprised. I transformed so completely that I could have walked past him in a supermarket without so much as a blink. He didn't see me as someone from his past, just another body in the lineup. It should have felt powerful, but all it did was hurt, because to him I'd never mattered enough to remember. That night I stared at myself in the mirror of the hotel room. The outfit I was set to wear, a long black coat with jagged stitching and boots that looked like they were built for war, hung on the hook behind me like armor. I didn't feel strong, I felt exposed. But then I remembered Clara's words, to choose your spotlight, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to walk that runway for revenge. I was going to walk it for me. The next evening, the show began. Backstage, the energy pulsed like electricity. Hair dryers, last-minute fittings, makeup artists barking directions, photographers swarmed like bees. I stood at the top of the runway, heart pounding in my chest. The lights dimmed. The music began, a slow, thunderous beat like a pulse from beneath the earth. And then silence. My cue. I stepped forward. Each stride felt like a release. The runway wasn't a place to impress anymore, it was a place to exist. Every camera flash was a strobe light memory of everything I'd survived. Every click a nail sealing the coffin of my former shame. I didn't look for Mason. I didn't need to. Because when I reached the end of the runway, the cameras going wild, the room breathless, I paused, turned, and saw him standing in the wings. And he saw me. His mouth parted just slightly. Recognition, disbelief. Then something else. Shame. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just turned and walked back. Not as the boy he laughed at, but as the man he could never become. There's something surreal about becoming an image. After Berlin, things exploded. The Lazarus show was featured in nearly every fashion, blog, online magazine, and industry podcast. Headlines weren't just about the clothes, they were about me. The mystery face who opened Lazarus. From stock boy to spotlight, the rise of Jaxon Reed. Revenge never looked so good, but I hadn't done it for revenge. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Still, when I saw Mason's face in the background of a blurry photo, mouth open clearly watching me, I saved it, quietly, for myself. After that, I barely had time to breathe. My calendar was a mess of flights, fittings, photo shoots. Clara built a team around me, a stylist, a publicist, a trainer. I didn't even recognize my own life. It was like I'd stepped into someone else's shoes. And they fit. But there was one shoot that changed everything. It was for a high-concept magazine in London, the kind that didn't just shoot fashion. They told stories. The creative director, Milo, was eccentric in the way only real artists are. Tattooed fingers glitter in his beard chain, smoking cloves even inside the studio. "I don't want perfection," he said during our first meeting. "I want pain. I want truth. I want the cracks." I nodded, unsure of what he meant. The set was minimalist, a bare concrete room with one metal chair in the center. The concept, solitude. The wardrobe, a plain white shirt, ripped jeans, no shoes, no makeup, no styling, just me. "Strip it all down," Milo said. "I want the man, not the model." At first I did what I always did. I posed, angled my face. Did that thing where I let my jaw clench, eyes narrow, the look people called dangerous or unreadable. But Milo wasn't impressed. "Cut the crap, Jackson," he snapped, lowering his camera. "I've seen those eyes 100 times. They sell cologne and lie about their childhoods. I want you, the real you." I stiffened. "This is me." "No, it's armor." He stepped closer. "What's the ugliest thing someone ever said about your face?" The question hit me like a punch. I looked away. "I don't want to know." "Say it." Out loud. I didn't speak. Milo didn't blink. "You want to last in this industry? You better learn to bleed for the lens." And just like that, the walls cracked. "Frankenstein?" I muttered. Milo tilted his head. What I clenched my fists. They used to call me Frankenstein. Said I looked like a stitched-up freak. The silence in the studio grew thick. I expected pity. Instead, Milo raised his camera. "Now say that again, but this time stare straight at me, and own it." Something inside me shifted. I lifted my head, looked directly at the lens. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. Frankenstein. Click. Then I said it again. Frankenstein. Click. And again. Each time louder. Until it wasn't shame, I felt it was power. Milo didn't stop shooting for 20 minutes. I sat, stood, curled up, stretched out, shouted, whispered. Every emotion I'd locked away since I was 17 poured out: rage, grief, defiance, pride. By the end I was shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was freedom. When the session ended, Milo didn't say much, just nodded. "That's the cover." A week later, the photos dropped. No retouching, no filters, just me, raw, exposed, haunted, and alive. The industry didn't know what to do with it. Some hated it, others called it genius. But no one could ignore it. My following doubled overnight. Messages poured in, not from fans, but from survivors. People who had been bullied, mocked, ignored. One message stayed with me. "I haven't looked at a mirror in years, but your photo made me want to try." That night, I sat in my apartment far from London, far from the spotlight, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. I didn't see a model. I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who finally stopped running from his reflection, and suddenly I wasn't ashamed of the cracks anymore, because they were mine. They say fame changes you. That's not quite true. Fame reveals you. After the London shoot, everything changed. I wasn't just promising anymore. I was the next face of honest fashion, according to some editorial in Hawthorne. Campaigns rolled in from Paris, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. I was flown out, dressed up, flattered, studied. People whispered around me as if I couldn't hear. "That's him, the one from the Lazarus show, the Frankenstein guy." It never stung the way it used to. Somehow repeating the word during Milo's shoot had taken its teeth away. But something else was creeping in, something harder to name. The price of being seen. It started subtly. A manager from a bigger agency invited Clara and me to a rooftop party in Manhattan. I was hesitant, but Clara said it was good networking. The rooftop overlooked the entire skyline, shimmering glass buildings stretching like spires into the dark. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine, not because they were styled, but because they belonged there. They laughed like the world was already theirs. I hovered near the railing, a glass of water in hand. That's when a man in a slim gray suit approached. Perfect skin, practiced smile. Jaxon Reed, right big fan. I'm Aaron from Merge Talent. He handed me a card that felt heavier than gold. I've seen your shoots. The Milo one was brave, but you don't have to carry that pain forever, you know. We can clean your brand up, smooth the edges, get you into fragrance deals, maybe even some light film work. He said it like it was mercy. I raised an eyebrow. Smooth the edges, Aaron sipped his cocktail. We've got the resources to soften the story. You've done the raw thing, it worked. Now you pivot. Become the fantasy. The world doesn't want to dwell on pain forever. I glanced out at the skyline. So that was the game. Use your trauma to get noticed, then erase it. I didn't take his card. Later that night, Clara caught up to me in the lobby. You okay? I nodded, but something twisted in my chest. I think I'm scared. She paused. Of what of? Disappearing again. But this time, on the inside. A month later, I was walking the runway in Milan. This one was different. Flashier, massive venue, global audience. Backstage was a blur of stylists yelling, models changing at lightning speed, clipboards flying. I stood in front of a mirror as they painted my face with light bronzer, tamed my hair, layered me in a sculpted wool coat that made me look 10 feet tall. Strong jaw, someone whispered. Perfect symmetry. I wanted to laugh. I'd spent years trying not to be seen. Now I was being studied like I was a sculpture. The runway was long, a mirrored floor reflecting the lights above like I was walking on water. Music pulsed through the walls. As I waited for my cue, I closed my eyes and counted my breaths. You're here. You're not hiding anymore. Then the signal. I stepped forward. The lights were blinding, the crowd a blur, but the cameras, they were sharp. Thousands of lenses capturing every movement, every blink, every line in my face. Halfway down the runway, I looked to the right, and that's when I saw him. A group of my old classmates. Mason wasn't there, but the others were. The same ones who had laughed around that fire years ago. They were older now, softer around the eyes. One of them, Nate, looked right at me, his expression shock, then respect, maybe even regret. I didn't look away. I let him see me, all of me. When I reached the end of the runway, I turned slowly, giving the cameras their final shot. I could feel it, the control, the narrative bending around me instead of against me. Backstage, I finally exhaled, but the high didn't last long. That night in the hotel, I sat in front of my phone, scrolling through headlines. Jaxon Reed, the face of a new masculinity, flawed is the new perfect, why we love. Jaxon Reed, all praise, all validation, and yet, I felt numb, like the louder the applause got, the less I could hear myself think. That's when I realized something terrifying. I had become addicted to being seen, not as a person, but as a symbol. And that kind of fame. It doesn't nourish you, it consumes you. I thought I'd escaped the fire, but maybe I just built a prettier one and stepped right back in. The past has a way of waiting for the perfect moment to crash into your present. For me, that moment came in the form of a charity gala. I wasn't supposed to be there. Originally, I declined the invitation. I was exhausted. I'd just flown back from a campaign shoot in Iceland, and all I wanted was to spend the weekend in silence. But Clara insisted. It's good press, she said. They'll be honoring young talent. You're not just a model anymore. You're a brand. A brand. That word still made something tighten in my chest, but I showed up. The venue was extravagant, tall chandeliers, velvet carpets, wine that cost more than my old rent. Cameras lined the entrance, flashes bursting like fireworks as guests arrived in waves of designer black. I wore a fitted tux, clean cut, no frills. They called it timeless. I called it armor. Inside, the crowd shimmered with power. Editors, designers, actors, influencers. And then just as I was sipping sparkling water and trying to look interested in a speech, I heard it. Jaxon? The voice was hesitant, too familiar. I turned slowly. It was Mason. The Mason. He looked older, still broad-shouldered and clean-shaven, but less golden. There were faint lines at the corners of his eyes, and the charm that once dripped from his every word now felt muted like a song played through old speakers. He was wearing a suit that tried too hard to impress, and beside him was a woman clinging to his arm with bored eyes. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Man, I can't believe it's really you. I didn't move. He laughed nervously. You look, wow, like damn. The whole world's been talking about you. You're what do they call you? The face of real beauty or something? I nodded once, something like that. He stuck out a hand. I'm happy for you, really. It's amazing what you've done. I didn't shake it. Instead, I said quietly, do you remember the bonfire? Mason's hand faltered. His smile faded. He looked around like someone might rescue him from this. Man, that was so long ago. We were kids. We said a lot of dumb stuff back then, right? I didn't look away. You said I looked like Frankenstein. He ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, I remember. But come on, that was just, we were messing around. You know how guys are. You said it more than once. I didn't mean anything by it, I swear. His voice lowered like he was trying to level with me. Look, I'm not that guy anymore. Life's been humbling. I've been divorced, twice, lost my job last year. Seeing you out there, man, it actually gave me hope. Like maybe we all have a second act, you know, hope. He thought I was here to inspire him, as if my pain had been a stepping stone for his self-esteem. But I didn't scream. I didn't spit. I didn't list the nights I cried alone, the jobs I was too scared to apply, for the years I spent hiding from every camera. Instead, I said calmly, I didn't become this to show you I could. I became this because I was tired of letting people like you define me. Mason swallowed. I could see the shame behind his eyes now. It wasn't the kind that wants to change. It was the kind that just wants to be forgiven so it can feel better. I stepped closer, not threatening, but clear. I don't need an apology. He blinked. You don't know, I said, because your voice doesn't matter anymore, and that's the best revenge I'll ever get. I walked away before he could answer. Later that night, I found myself alone in a balcony corridor outside the ballroom, leaning against the rail, breathing in the cold air. Clara eventually joined me. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I saw him. She added. I know. She paused. That took a lot of strength. I shrugged. I don't think it was strength. I think I just don't need anything from him anymore. And that feels new. She looked at me carefully. You've changed. I looked down at my hands. No. I think I finally stopped changing. This is me. And for the first time in a long time, that felt enough. Fame, when it settles into your skin, doesn't feel like a thunderstorm. It feels like humidity, warm, constant, invisible, until you can't breathe. After the gala, the calls didn't stop. Luxury brands, movie studios, endorsements, talk shows, even a memoir deal. Clara fielded most of them, shielding me like a hawk. But some slipped through, especially the ones promising to elevate the brand of Jaxon Reed. That phrase kept showing up, like I was no longer a person, but a product. And with it came Aaron. You remember Aaron, the talent manager from the rooftop party in Manhattan. Perfect teeth, slick smile, a professional illusionist in a suit. He called Clara personally. Let's be honest, he told her the vulnerability thing has been done. Jackson's story? It's great, but it's time to pivot. Time for control. Clara wasn't impressed. He is in control. Aaron laughed. Not yet. He pushed for a meeting. Just me. Private. No pressure. Clara raised an eyebrow when I told her. You want to go? I shrugged. I want to hear. That's all. The meeting took place at a sleek glass building on the west side of the city. High floors, minimalist furniture, soft jazz bleeding through the walls. It smelled like expensive cologne and freshly signed contracts. Aaron met me in a gray turtleneck and blazer, his hair styled within an inch of its life. Jaxon, he grinned. My man. I sat down across from him. He launched right in. You've got gravity. That's rare. You walk into a room and people adjust to you. But here's the thing. Pain sells, but only for a season. People want an arc. They want the glow up, the redemption. He tapped a file on the desk. I've put together a 12-month plan, image shift, new wardrobe strategy, hair. Maybe we get you in a rom-com. Build a narrative where you're not just the guy who survived bullying, you're the guy who wins at everything. And by wins, you mean becomes like everyone else, I asked. He leaned forward. No, I mean becomes palatable. Everyone already feels sorry for you. Now it's time they envy you. That sat wrong with me, but I didn't walk out, not right away. because a small gnawing part of me, the one that still remembered every cruel joke every moment I stared into a mirror and hated what I saw, wanted what Aaron was selling. Power, not just to be seen, but to be admired. Later that night, I stared at my reflection again. It had become a habit, the mirror check, but not out of vanity, out of confusion. I kept searching for signs of me beneath the perfection others had built around me, and I was starting to lose sight. The next morning, I did something impulsive. I walked out of my penthouse apartment hoodie, up no security, no entourage. I took the subway, something I hadn't done in nearly a year. No one recognized me, or if they did, they didn't say anything. I ended up outside the old grocery store where I used to work. It was still there. Different staff, new signs, but the shelves were the same. The fluorescent light still buzzed. I wandered inside. No one stopped me. No one pointed. It was like stepping into a forgotten version of myself. Then I saw her, Julia, my old coworker. She was behind the register, counting bills, still in her faded green smock. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her eyes widened, then softened. "Jaxon," she whispered. I smiled. "Hey." She came around the counter and hugged me without hesitation. "You didn't forget us," she said. "Never could." We sat in the back room sipping lukewarm coffee from paper cups. She asked about everything, the shoots, the flights, the fame. I gave her the surface answers. She gave me the grounding I didn't know I needed. Before I left, she said something that stopped me cold. "Just promise me one thing, anything. Don't become one of them. The ones who forget what their face looked like before the world told them who to be." That night, I canceled the follow-up meeting with Aaron. Clara didn't say "I told you so." She just handed me a bottle of wine and said "good call." But the temptation didn't vanish. Every photo shoot, every interview, every click of a camera was a tiny negotiation between who I was and who the world wanted me to become. I knew something was wrong when I stopped sleeping. It started as restlessness, tossing, turning, scrolling through social media at 3 a.m. Then came the full-blown insomnia. No matter how tired I felt, the moment I lay down, my mind would start racing. Was I being real enough? Was I forgetting who I was? Was it all going to vanish? Even the silence felt loud, like 1,000 invisible voices reminding me I didn't deserve any of this. Clara noticed. "You're stretched too thin," she said one morning in the car on the way to a shoot. "You've got interviews, fittings, red carpets, shoots. You're bleeding into everyone else's image of you. Where's your line?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know anymore. The breakdown wasn't planned. No one schedules those. It happened during a live interview. I was booked on The Perspective, a polished, glossy talk show known for its intimate sit-downs with rising stars. It was supposed to be a fluff piece, 10 minutes about fashion, 5 about my story. A quick smile to the camera and done. The studio lights were hot. Too hot. The host, Miranda, smiled at me across the glass coffee table. "So, Jaxon," she said brightly, "you've become a symbol for resilience, for transformation. Millions of people look up to you. When you think back to the boy you were the one they mocked, what would you tell him now?" It was a softball question. I should have said something elegant, poetic, but instead something cracked. "I don't know," I said. Miranda blinked. "You don't know." I shifted in my seat. My palms were sweating. "I mean, I'd like to tell him it gets better, that he'll be admired someday, that the pain ends. But that's not really true, is it?" The audience went silent. I continued, my voice unraveling. People didn't stop judging. They just started doing it with better lighting. And now I carry this performance like armor every single day. It's exhausting. Miranda tried to pivot. "But surely you feel proud of what you've overcome." "Do I said, almost laughing. I look in the mirror and I see a stranger half the time. I smile for the cameras, but it's never my smile. It's the one they want, the one they built. And sometimes I wonder if the boy I used to be would even recognize me." The producer signaled off camera. They were trying to cut. Miranda leaned in, her voice softer now. "Jaxon, are you okay?" And in front of millions watching live, I said, "No, I'm not." I stood up, pulled off the mic, and walked off the set. No excuses, no apologies, just gone. Clara found me hours later in my apartment, sitting on the floor against the couch with my phone turned off and my laptop open to a blank document. I thought she'd be furious. Instead, she sat beside me. "I know you think you just ruined everything," she said. "Didn't I?" She shook her head. "No, you told the truth. You did what everyone says they want and what no one actually does. I rubbed my face. The internet's going to eat me alive. She paused. Or maybe they'll finally see you. The next morning, the headlines weren't what I expected. Jaxon Reed walks off live interview and breaks the mold. A model of vulnerability. Jackson's honest moment sparks global conversation. Too real for TV. Yes, there were critics, but there were more people who reached out with something else. Gratitude. I read a message after message. Thank you for saying it out loud. I've been faking smiles for years. You gave me permission to stop performing. Something shifted in me that week. Not a collapse, a release. Because I wasn't built to be an icon. I was built to be human. When the headlines faded and the noise quieted, I did the one thing I'd avoided for years. I went home. Not the city apartment with the tall glass windows. Not the rented suite in Berlin or the penthouse in Seoul. Home. The small 2-bedroom house tucked behind the dry cleaners in the neighborhood I used to walk through with my hoodie pulled tight around my face. It felt smaller than I remembered. The paint was chipping. The screen door creaked. The welcome mat was more threadbare than friendly. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not even Clara. I just packed a bag, turned off my phone, and drove 5 hours in silence. No music, just the hum of tires on highway, and a heart that wouldn't stop pacing. My sister Marcy opened the door. She stared at me for a second, her mouth open. Then without a word, she pulled me into the kind of hug only siblings understand, bone deep and wordless. Thought you'd forgotten where you came from, she whispered into my shoulder. I never forgot, I said. I just got lost. That first night, I slept for 11 hours straight. No dreams, no pacing, no checking notifications. Just sleep the kind that feels like being held underwater in the best way. The next morning, I sat in the kitchen where I used to eat cereal alone and listened to Marcy talk about her job, her kids, her worries. She didn't mention my fame. She didn't ask about fashion shows. She just talked to me like I was Jackson, her little brother, who used to stay up late, drawing comic books and drinking too much chocolate milk. It was the most human I'd felt in months. Later, I found the old box, stuffed in the back of the hall closet behind winter coats and faded blankets. My high school journals, sketches, crumpled essays, even a few photographs. And in the middle of it all, a picture I hadn't seen in years. Me at 13, gangly, awkward braces, wearing a hand-me-down hoodie 2 sizes too big. My arm was around Marcy. We were both grinning. I looked innocent, not in a naive way, in a free way. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I picked up a pencil and I drew, not for content, not for a brand, just for me. I sketched the old grocery store, the cereal aisle, my first runway, Milo's studio, Clara sipping coffee, Julia's green smock, the bonfire, Mason's smirk. My own reflection cracked and reassembled like stained glass. Each stroke was therapy, each line a thread pulling me back into myself. One night, Marcy found me on the porch, wrapped in an old blanket, staring at the stars. Can I ask you something? She said. I nodded. Why now? Why come back? I exhaled, because for a long time I thought becoming someone new would erase who I used to be. But it didn't. It just buried him, and I realized I missed him. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that stayed with me. You were never broken, Jax. Just hidden. The next morning, I packed up and headed back to the city, not to return to the spotlight, but to decide what came next on my terms. Clara picked me up at the station. She didn't ask questions, she just drove. Later over dinner, she finally said, You ready to go back out there? I thought about it, then said, I'm ready to stop hiding, but I won't perform anymore. Not for applause, not for money, not even for sympathy. Clara smiled. Good, because there's a campaign that wants you not the version people made of you. Who, Vero? It's a mental health initiative. They want to spotlight people who've survived themselves. I laughed. I think I qualify. That night, I sat at my desk, opened a new document, and started writing. Not a statement, not a pitch, just a letter. To the boy at the bonfire. I told him he was stronger than they said, that he would grow into the face they feared, that his silence would one day be louder than their cruelty, and that no matter how many cameras tried to define him, he'd always belonged to himself. Coming back wasn't a relaunch, it was a reclamation. The campaign with Vero wasn't glamorous. No private jets, no velvet robes, no champagne backstage. Just a modest studio, a black backdrop, and a single question written on a whiteboard. What did it take to survive yourself? The photographer was quiet, gentle, nothing like the fast-paced chaos of high fashion. He didn't give direction. He didn't ask for angles. He just let the silence do the work. I sat on a wooden stool. My body relaxed, the light soft and even. No makeup, no styling, just me. The shoot lasted 30 minutes. When it was over, he shook my hand and said, "That felt honest." The images were released a week later, simple portraits, raw and stripped down. One of me looking directly at the camera shadows under my eyes, hair unstyled, expression unreadable but real. And people responded, not with the usual heart emojis or fire symbols, with stories, long emotional comments, messages from people who'd been bullied, who'd lived through depression, who were still trying to crawl out of the weight of their own mirrors. That campaign didn't trend globally. It didn't land me a fragrance deal, but it brought me something better, peace. Clara and I started having different conversations after that, not about brand direction, but about boundaries, purpose, legacy. "What do you want now?" she asked one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on my couch, sipping tea. I thought about it for a long time. Connection, I finally said, not attention, just honest connection. So we changed everything. No more auto-approved endorsements, no more high-gloss, soulless shoots. We launched a small project, a digital series called Face Forward, where I interviewed people from all walks of life about their experiences with self-image and identity. No scripts, no filters, just human to human. And every episode started with the same line, "Tell me what you used to believe about your face." The series caught on slowly, then like wildfire. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. And in that realness, I started healing in places I didn't even know were wounded. Months passed, then came the invitation. Not a campaign, not a show, a gala. The same one from a year ago, the one where I'd run into Mason. This time they wanted me as the keynote speaker. I almost said no, but Clara said something I couldn't ignore. "You didn't walk through that fire just to avoid the smoke." So I went. Same venue, same glittering chandeliers, same velvet robes. But this time, I wasn't the outsider. I was the reason the cameras were pointed in the first place. I didn't arrive with an entourage. I wore a simple fitted black suit, no designer label, no sponsorship tag. I stepped onto the stage and stood behind the podium as the room quieted. I looked out across the sea of curated faces and said, "My name is Jaxon Reed. You probably know my story or the version that made headlines. But I'm not here to retell it. I'm here to say something simpler, something I wish someone had said to me a long time ago." I paused. "You are not your worst moment." Silence. "You are not the cruel nickname. You are not the reflection you once hated. You are not the voice in your head that asks, 'Why would anyone want to look at me?'" I leaned forward. "And if someone's ever made you feel invisible, I want you to know that was never a reflection of you. It was a flaw in them." Applause came slowly, then all at once. I stepped off the stage to a standing ovation. And I didn't cry, not because I wasn't moved, but because for once the applause didn't feel like a drug. It felt like closure. Later that evening, I stood near the back of the room nursing a glass of ginger ale, watching the crowd dance and mingle. That's when I saw her, a teenage girl, maybe 15, hovering near the edge of the room. Pale skin, braces, big glasses, hair pulled tight. She looked like someone I used to know. She walked up shyly, clutching a small notebook. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Can I tell you something?" "Of course." She took a breath. "I used to hide behind my hair, like all the time, because people would say I looked weird, but then I saw your photos, and I cut it. I just cut it all off." She smiled nervously. "I think I wanted to stop hiding too." I smiled back. "Good, because you were never meant to hide." She handed me the notebook. "Will you sign it?" I did. And as she turned to leave, she paused. "Thank you for not being perfect." That night I walked home under a sky full of stars, with no flashbulbs, no cameras, just the sound of my footsteps on pavement, and the quiet, undeniable feeling of being whole. The invitation came in a cream-colored envelope with silver lettering. Alumni Gala Class of 20X Reconnect, Celebrate, Reflect, my old high school. The same one that had once been a theater of humiliation, whispered jokes, side eyes, cruel nicknames, and silent lunches. At first I laughed and tossed the envelope aside, but it kept catching my eye. I wasn't that kid anymore. I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, and yet, something in me was curious, not out of ego, out of closure. I called Clara. "They want me to speak," I said. "It's not a huge event. Just a few hundred, local press." She paused. "Do you want to do it?" I exhaled. "I think I need to." The gymnasium looked smaller than I remembered. The banners were faded. The stage was still the same creaky wooden platform where we used to deliver book reports and stand in line for cafeteria trays. There was no velvet carpet, no fashion lights, just folding chairs and two bright fluorescent bulbs buzzing like bees. I walked in wearing a plain charcoal sweater and black jeans. No statement pieces, no designer logos, just me. Some people recognized me immediately. Some did double takes. Some avoided eye contact completely. And then toward the back of the room I saw him. Mason. This time no smug smile, just silence. He gave a faint nod. I returned it. That was enough. When they called my name, the applause was polite, curious, measured. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and looked out at the faces older versions of the classmates who had once made me question my worth. "I don't have a prepared speech," I began. "I only have a story." A few heads tilted. I grew up thinking my face was a problem, that it needed to be hidden, fixed, softened. I thought silence made me safe, that if I stayed quiet enough, maybe the world would forget to hurt me. I scanned the room, not for sympathy, just for presence. And for a long time, I believed the people who said I wasn't enough. I believed the laughter, the jokes, the labels. I paused, but I was wrong. A silence fell over the room like fog. I wasn't broken. I wasn't grotesque. I was just unfinished. A girl in the second row wiped her eye. And while I've walked runways and worn expensive clothes, none of that gave me peace. Not until I stopped trying to look like someone worth seeing and started believing I already was. I leaned forward slightly. "So if you remember anything from this talk, let it be this. You don't need to become someone else to be loved. You don't need to shrink or sculpt or shine to be worthy." My voice softened. "Your story is enough, even the jagged parts." And then I added with a small smile, "especially the jagged parts." When I stepped down, the room didn't erupt in applause. It stood in silence. Then the clapping came hesitant at first, then full. Not like a celebration, like a thank you. Afterward, people came up in waves. Some apologized, some shared their own wounds. One guy, a former classmate who once laughed the loudest, shook my hand and said, "You made me feel like maybe it's not too late to stop pretending." Mason never approached me, but he lingered, and as I was leaving, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It wasn't him, it was a teacher, Ms. Thorne, my 9th grade English teacher, the one who once let me read during lunch just to avoid the cafeteria. "You always had something," she said quietly. I smiled. "Thanks for letting me be invisible when I needed it." She touched my arm. "And thank you for showing up now when they needed you." That night, I walked the halls of the school alone. I passed the old lockers, the vending machine that used to eat my change, the library where I used to draw comics no one saw. I found myself in front of the bathroom mirror, the same one I used to avoid. I looked at myself, really looked, and for once I didn't see someone who needed to be fixed. I saw the boy who had survived. I saw the man he had become. And I said quietly, "I'm proud of you." Fame didn't heal me. The camera didn't validate me. What did time, honesty, stillness, letting go of the version of me that needed revenge, and embracing the version that only ever needed permission to be? If someone once told you you were too strange, too ugly, too awkward, too much, I'm here to tell you they were wrong. You are not too much. You are just enough. And one day, whether it's on a runway or in your own reflection, you'll see it too. Because the most beautiful face in the world is the one that finally believes it belongs. If you've ever struggled with being judged for how you look or been told you weren't enough, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters. And if this story moved, you don't forget to subscribe to Ethan's Way. There are more stories waiting to remind you you are not alone.